Geek to me radio, da 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 da. Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da.
Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to another episode of Geek to Me Radio, episode number 300. Today we'll be talking with legendary director Martin Campbell. We'll talk about his brand new movie he's got out, Memory, starring Liam Neeson in theaters right now. We'll talk about whether or not we need a female James Bond, his thoughts looking back on the Green Lantern film, all that and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And for those of you who may be finding us for the very first time, welcome to you. Welcome to Geek to Me Radio, the show where we talk about all things pop culture with a focus on TV, movies, video games, and comic books. I'm your host, James Enstall. For longtime listeners, welcome back to you. Hopefully, I don't know if any of you have been with me for 300 of the episodes, but hopefully you've found me. You've enjoyed what we've done here on the show, these past 299 episodes leading up to this. And if you haven't already, either a new or old listener, please subscribe, whatever podcast platform you're hearing us on right now. Hit that subscribe button if you would. And if you have not taken the time to leave us a 5-star review, that's something you could do that costs you nothing and always helps us out. We do appreciate that as well. With that said, we've got a fantastic guest. Let's dive right in.
I'm over the moon to talk to my next guest. He is a BAFTA award-winning filmmaker, a critically acclaimed, highly sought-after director. His pedigree in television and film is something that's well known to everybody. The one, the only Mr. Martin Campbell. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks very much, James. Yes.
So the new film you've got coming out, April 29th, if you're listening right now, you can catch it at your local Marcus Theaters or Movie Tavern, Memory, starring Liam Neeson. This, just the previews I've seen have me excited for this film. If I'm not mistaken, this is your first time working with Liam Neeson. Am I correct?
Yes, it is. It's the first time I've worked with him.
And this cast, you've got Monica Bellucci, Guy Pearce in it as well. From what I've seen in the previews and from what I know of the story, it reminds me a little bit of elements of the Assassination Bureau with Oliver Reed, mixed with a little bit of Memento. It's a great premise. Talk a little bit, if you would, about coming on to direct this project.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a movie it was actually a Belgian movie shot in 2003, I think it was. And it was given to me, I think, about 2013. And I saw a DVD of this movie, and I thought it was really good. So basically, I did an American version of it. So we got someone to write. We set it against the U.S.-Mexican border, and we made some adjustments to the original story, but it's pretty much as the original story was. But a very interesting premise about a hitman, a professional hitman, who is getting Alzheimer's gradually. He's deteriorating as the Alzheimer's increases, and this becomes fundamental to the plot. And it really is what drives the story.
And with remakes, obviously, you famously did Edge of Darkness in 2010, starring Mel Gibson, same as the British television series for which you won a BAFTA.
Yeah.
When you're doing a remake, even one that you've worked on before, is there in your mind as a director kind of you want to up the game a little bit from the original probably? How do you kind of approach that, your mindset as a director from that aspect?
Well, what you do is you see the original, and if you think you can strengthen it or that you have a different idea. Is, for example, the ending of our movie is very different to the ending of the original movie. The action pieces have been increased in the movie and are different to the original movie, but from a narrative point of view, from a story point of view, they're pretty much the same. And the whole premise of the movie is different, as it's based on sex trafficking, across the U.S.-Mexican border, which of course the original didn't have because it was a Belgian movie.
Right.
And so, we said in El Paso, which of course is a big, transit point from Mexico into the U.S. So it was perfectly placed to adapt the story.
Taj Atwal's also in Memory, and I noticed Taj Atwal also in The Protege. And when I did my research, you've got these actors who you'll use in different movies you've done. Like, obviously, Joe Don Baker was in Criminal Law. Obviously, he played Jack Wade in Goldeneye. You've got Stuart Wilson, actor, pops up in a lot of your films as well. Is that something you kind of, if you've worked with someone before, do you have a hand in casting, or is it just happenstance that you get to work with such great people on a regular basis?
No, I get to make the decision on casting. In the case of Joe Don Baker, Stuart Wilson, people like that, it's just that they're damn good actors, and I like working with them. I get on well with them, and even in, I think, my last three films, I've tended to work with one or two of the same actors. Ray Ferron, for example, is a classic example, who was in he was in The Foreigner, he was in The Protege, and he's subsequently in the new film. So he's just an actor I love working with, and a fine actor, British theatrical actor, and I just like working with the same people when they're very talented, and so that's why I do it.
And you've worked with so many fantastic actors throughout your career, going back to Criminal Law. You've got Gary Oldman, Kevin Bacon, obviously Mask of Zorro. You get to, and then come back into the sequel, Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones. You've got Scott Glenn in Vertical Limit, Clive Owen, an impressive array of people. Is there anyone you've worked with once before who you really would love to have the chance to work with again, you haven't had to?
Well, you know what? Any of the above you just mentioned. I mean, all of those guys, I would be very happy to work with again. And, particularly Clive Owen, I love working with. I worked with Angelina Jolie, I had a great relationship with, who was very hardworking, excellent actress. I worked with her. Her and Clive Owen were in a movie I did. Obviously, Ray Liotta I worked with. Mm-hmm. These guys, they're just fine actors, simple as that. And I enjoyed working with them, and they gave excellent performances. And I can honestly say that there's not an actor that I've worked with that I wouldn't work with again.
You mentioned The Foreigner.
Maybe.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, there may be one or two. I'm not going to mention them, but
we won't call them out in the interview. They know who they are.
Yes, indeed, mate.
You mentioned The Foreigner, which hands down one of my top 5 films of 2017. Absolutely loved it. It was intense. It was emotional. A lot of action sequences. When you were brought on to direct that, I'm always curious with directors, because obviously you're approached for several projects all the time saying, hey, would you be willing to direct this? You've got to turn stuff down and make decisions of what you're going to do. What was it about The Foreigner that made you say yes?
Well, I love the idea of, first of all, Jackie Chan was always connected to The Foreigner. And the idea that I've always thought that if you go back to The Karate Kid, which he did prior to The Foreigner, he's excellent in that film, playing a very straight part. And, we all know Jackie Chan for what he's so brilliant at and so forth. But the great challenge here was to get him to play the sort of seemingly this old man, right, who not only has lost his 2 daughters in an earlier encounter, but his 3rd daughter he loses, right? And of course he sets out on this mission to seek justice for the death of his daughters. But the idea that he's playing a straight role and he's not doing what he normally does, if you see what I mean, that was exciting to me. But I'll tell you the other thing I loved about it was it was set in Ireland against the IRA, you know, so it didn't fall into the cliched category of yet another Jackie Chan revenge movie. There was a subplot with Pearce Brosnan, which I thought was really interesting, and actually, you know, was way more interesting than just the revenge story. If you so the intertwining of both those stories, I thought was really interesting.
Definitely. And then you got to work with Pearce Brosnan again, which we're talking about this being the 60th anniversary. The Academy Awards just had a lovely tribute to James Bond during that event. Your two acting credits that are listed are for GoldenEye and Casino Royale, both which obviously you directed. You're a cyclist in GoldenEye, and you're one of the airport workers in that fantastic scene in Casino Royale where he's doing that chase across the Miami airport. That kind of makes you the Alfred Hitchcock of Bond movies, if you think about it, because you're an actor who pops up in the movie.
We're going to pause right there, take a quick commercial break, come back and chat more with director Martin Campbell. Please stand by.
James Bond Jr. chases gold around the world.
This is John Glenn, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
Meeting you with a view to a kill.
Welcome back to Geek to Me Radio. Want to make sure we tell you about our official movie sponsor, Marcus Theaters. That's Marcus Theaters and, of course, Movie Tavern, as the two are related. If you are looking to get out and see Memory, directed by Martin Campbell and starring Liam Neeson, if you're wanting to get out and see, maybe you haven't seen The Batman yet, or maybe you're anxious to see Doctor Strange, the sequel to the last Marvel movie, and kind of giving us more of that multiverse of madness type of flair we got a taste for in the last Spider-Man movie, you want to get out and see these movies in the proper setting. That means the best visual, the best audio, and if you're like me, the best concessions and things like that. Marcus Theaters ticks all those boxes. If you go to the website marcustheaters.com, you can find the location of the Marcus Theaters or the Movie Tavern closest to you, so you can buy your tickets right there online and go see a movie in the best possible atmosphere. Make sure while you are there or online or at the theater, wherever it is, you sign up for their magical movie rewards program. That way you start getting rewards and points with every purchase you make, and those points can be then redeemed on future purchases, be they if you want to get use your points on free snow caps, or if you want to get an extra popcorn or something like that, or if you just want to get some movie tickets, you're going to go back and get more movie tickets. You can use your points towards that as well. It's free to sign up, costs you absolutely nothing. There's not a yearly subscription fee or anything like that at all, and you just immediately start earning points with your first purchase. We are very, very, very big movie people here on Geek to Me Radio. Joey V probably sees more movies than I do every year, and we always encourage you to see the movies in the best possible surroundings, and that is always what Marcus Theaters delivers. MarcusTheaters.com, again, is the website for the best movie-going experience in the galaxy. Before we took that last break, we were chatting with director Martin Campbell, and I'd asked him, I said, you've got 2 acting credits on your IMDb page, and they're both for the 007 films. It kind of makes you the Alfred Hitchcock of James Bond, if you think about it.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, no, look, the great thing about, I did GoldenEye, which was the first of the Pearce Brosnan. I was lucky enough to be asked to do the first of the Daniel Craig movies. So for me, because tonally we made a big shift, if you see what I mean, in the tone of the movies. That was what was exciting about it. And, Pearce, who I felt was really good, but a traditional Bond in the sense, very good looking kind of, he played the Bond, if you will, that we know and love. But then when Daniel Craig came in, a much tougher, grittier, more realistic, I think, performance. And it just changed the whole of Bond, which was, that was exciting to do.
I got the chance to chat with John Glenn, your predecessor, who did 5 Bond films leading up to the bit of a gap we had before GoldenEye. And he said that it's one of the things that Barbara and Michael are so great about giving people the space to do what they want. And I know directors, some companies, like I think in a previous interview I've seen you mention with Warner Brothers, with Green Lantern, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen kind of changing things.
Oh, God, yes.
Whereas Barbara and Michael are very laid back and kind of trust the aces to do what they're supposed to be doing. I take it that's a better working environment for someone like you who's able to just kind of let their vision take over, yes?
Well, what's great is that Barbara and Michael, terrific producers, and they do. Amazingly, they leave you alone. They say the only time they will kind of make suggestions is if they think you're stepping outside the Bond oeuvre, if you will. But really, it's your movie. I mean, on GoldenEye, they pretty much let me, I directed it. I don't ever remember having any sort of argument with either of them about the cut or about the movie. And the same with Casino Royale. The point was they left me alone to do it. And, I probably had a couple of discussions with them during the shoot, but beyond that, nothing. They just let me get on with it. And I think John Glenn's absolutely right. They're marvelous. They just let you, put your vision on screen. And that's rare for producers, let me tell you.
Sticking with the Bond topic, I saw an interview that you said it was fantastic. Your mother evidently was a huge fan of the Bond novels, and the two of you went to see Dr. No in the theater. I couldn't imagine that as you and your mom were sitting there watching Dr. No that you ever dreamed that you would one day be directing a Bond film, let alone launching two brand new Bonds. That had to be a very surreal moment for you.
No, you know what? I think that was in '62 or whenever Dr. No came out. But she was a rabid fan of the books, right? And I do remember her being slightly kind of left-footed, where she said, she couldn't quite get with the humor that was Terence Young brought to Dr. No, which was terrific, of course, because the books have no humor whatsoever. They take themselves very seriously.
Oh, sure.
And Bond is much more the Daniel Craig in the books than he is the Sean Connery or obviously Roger Moore. So I remember her sort of querying about the humor, being a little bit thrown by that. But anyway, yes, I do remember that very clearly, going with her to the movie. And of course, obviously, I didn't even know what directors did in those days. So,
Yeah, it's interesting to think about looking back. And you've mentioned, too, what I think a quote that you gave was that you enjoy the pre- and post-production of the movie the best, and that you don't really like the shooting much because it's grueling and tough. You love seeing the whole film come together in the final process during post. Is that still, I'm not sure how old that quote was. Is that still your feeling?
Oh, God, yes. There's nothing greater than when you're finished shooting the film, you go into a nice warm cutting room, you're sitting there with your editor, and you're saying, let's do this. You know what I mean? That's terrific. I love that. The actual shooting is a grind, quite honestly, because, you're up at 4 a.m, you finish, they're 18-hour days, and you're dealing with different crises every day and so forth. So, yes, I much prefer the post-production than I do the actual shoot itself.
And I know with the Bond films, especially, Daniel Craig has almost quit after the previous one, Spectre, but he agreed to come back because he said it's just it takes a toll on you. It's taxing. It's hard work. And I imagine no less so for the director. You've said before that you were offered the one after GoldenEye, and as well with Casino Royale, you turned them down because you felt like you'd only be retreading new ground, but you're great at launching these, and you kind of feel like that's your wheelhouse. If they were to come back to you and say, hey, we're starting a brand new Bond franchise, Daniel Craig's done, would you come back and do it still?
Well, it'd be never say never, really. The thing is that the reason, certainly in the Pierce Brosnan things, was I just felt having done one, the character is established. I mean, he's established anyway because of Roger Moore and Sean Connery, but I just sort of felt that, and they very kindly kind of offered me the subsequent ones, but I sort of felt, how many control rooms can you blow up, basically? I mean, there's always some nutcase taking over the world and so forth, which is what's very enjoyable and so forth. But really, you repeat yourself. That's all. So that was the reason.
Looking at the previous Bond films, I know you're a Bond fan yourself before you were ever attached to GoldenEye. if you were allowed to go back in time and direct one Bond film from the history, is there a particular Bond film that you'd really like to have a crack at, be it because of the cast, because of the era, or for any reason at all?
Well, I loved, for example, I loved Goldfinger, which I think is a terrific movie. And of course, I'd love to have had a crack at that. But Guy Hamilton did a terrific job, so I couldn't improve on that. And From Russia with Love, again, is, From Russia with Love is great simply because it has its feet well and truly on the ground. There's no fantastic kind of, plot, anything like that. Very simple. A great villain in Robert Shaw playing the Russian agent, right? And it keeps its feet on the ground, as I say. It's got a reality about it, and it never kind of goes over the top. So that's another one I thought was probably my two favorites of those.
Do you have a favorite Bond villain?
A favorite Bond? Well, I love Mads. I mean, this is not me, but I love Mads Mikkelsen in Casino Royale, and I loved Goldfinger and Goldfinger. And again, obviously Robert Shaw in From Russia with Love. I mean, I think they were all great villains. I think they're the ones I enjoyed most.
And I posed this question to John Glenn. I'd just like to get your take on it because there's a lot of talk about it's time for a female James Bond. But I feel that there are so many great original female characters who kind of do that same thing. We saw Salt, you mentioned with Angelina Jolie, Atomic Blonde, even The Protege, Gunpowder Milkshake. There are movies that have a strong female spy action hero. Is it your feeling that we need a female James Bond?
We have another commercial break that we have to take. We're going to pause right there. Be back chatting with Martin Campbell. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio. Please stand by.
Hi, I'm Jim Pinnock, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio. Get in touch with your inner geek.
Snake Eater.
Welcome back. Geek to Me Radio. We do a live show. In addition to this podcast, we also do a live radio show every Sunday night. You can hear us in the greater St. Louis area on the Big 550 KTRS 550 AM every Sunday night at 9 o'clock Central. And of course, if you or would rather watch the show, Joey V, my executive producer, sets up cameras. So we stream on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram as well. So you can follow me on all those platforms and you can watch the show. We have great live guests every Sunday, and it's always a lot of fun for me to do the live show. But some of the guests, obviously, we can't get live, which is why we do pre-recorded. And now, of course, you're listening to this interview with Martin Campbell, which we did pre-recorded as well. Before we took that last break, I did ask him about, does he think we need a female James Bond?
No, I don't think it'll happen. And the reason I don't think it'll happen is because I think Barbara and Michael will want to stick to the origin, of Bond. And I suspect they'll want it to be a male. I mean, look, they're purists in that sense, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
My suspicion will be that they will want they'll want a male James Bond as opposed to a female one, and simply because they've always been dedicated to the book. And what most people don't realize, of course, he only wrote 7 novels, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Which they filmed, and Casino they could never get the rights to. I mean, they got that I think about 12 months before we shot it.
Oh, wow.
They got the rights. It used to belong to. I think it belonged to Columbia. They made what I thought was a dreadful kind of comedy out of it in 1967. And the rights were held, I think, by Columbia or whoever was. There was a bidding war between Tarantino and the Broccolis. The Broccolis won. But other than that, the only other Bond film they did not have the rights to was Thunderball. And if you look at the producing credits on Thunderball, you'll see that Kevin McClory is the one of the producers, and he managed to get the rights out of Ian Fleming, I think, before Fleming died. So, and even when Connery came back on Never Say Never, which was a Bond film without the Broccoli's, it was Kevin McClory who produced that because he still owned the rights. So I think that and Casino Royale were the two that for a long time the rights were unattainable. I think Thunderball, it's still the same. I think the rights still belong to Kevin McClory. But of course, Casino Royale, they managed to get the rights very, very recently, or just before we shot the film.
And I know that you mentioned both those films, the Bond adjacent films, as I will call them, Casino Royale and Never Say Never Again. Both still hold special places in my heart because it's Peter Sellers playing 007 for crying out loud in the one. And then you've got Sean Connery. It looked like he was having the time of his life in Never Say Never Again. So while not canon, those films still hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Never Say Never was a big success too. I mean, financial success. And I think at the time Sean was a little bit upset with, early on. I think he felt that he had contributed, more to the franchise while he was doing it. And I think there was some conflict with him and Cubby Broccoli. So I think the reason he did Never Say Never was to. Obviously, he was offered a lot of money to do it, so he did it for that reason. But I think it was also just to prove that, he could do it without the Broccoli, so without Cubby Broccoli. So I think there was an element of that about it, too.
I don't want to make this an entirely James Bond interview, so I'll shift gears here because I want to talk about one of my favorite movies. I saw this movie at least 4 times in the theater, The Mask of Zorro, which was such a swashbuckling, epic, brilliant film. The cast, the story, it's such a great movie. And if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the only movies in your whole resume that you actually came back to do the sequel for.
Yeah, well, the thing was that I think the sequel was too late. I think it was like 9 years after we did the original. That I actually took over from Robert Rodriguez on the original Zorro. And the irony of the whole thing was I turned it down 3 times before I finally accepted because I wasn't very happy with the script. And however, Spielberg was involved, which was great. So, we managed to, I think after the 3rd time, he finally convinced me to do it. And, we managed to get the script in order, and it was great because I love the humor. I also, it's kind of a Western, that movie.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? I know it's a swashbuckler, but it feels like a Western. And oddly enough, I went back to all the old Zorros with what's his name? Douglas Fairbanks. Right?
Yeah.
The old silent Zorros, which were terrific. I mean, he was wonderful, great sense of humor. He was a great action man. And if you look at those movies now, they were absolutely terrific, and tonally they were absolutely right. So I stole the kind of tone, as it were, from those movies.
And then were you offered the sequel? Did you come in and say, hey, I would love to do the sequel if you guys are going to do it? How did the setup for Legend of Zorro in 2005, how did that go?
Well, they came back to me and asked me to do it. So, so it was reteaming everybody, which was great. We went back to Mexico to shoot, and that was really DreamWorks coming back and Sony coming back and say, will you do the sequel? So I did.
And I've got to ask you about Green Lantern 2011, Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. Green Lantern's one of my favorite comic book characters. And I know you said going into this, you were not a comic book person. It's not like you grew up reading comic books, but you wanted to do a superhero film. The film actually holds up rather well. It's obviously not part of, now that they're trying to make these extended universes in Marvel and DC and kind of grow their universe out with incorporating other characters. Do you feel like Green Lantern was just a movie that was too early? Like if it had come out later, it would have been better received? What are your thoughts now looking back? Here we are almost a little over a decade on Green Lantern.
And right before we get that answer, we're going to take another commercial break here. But before we do go to break, I want to make sure we tell you about our official comic book sponsor, which is Bugs Comics and Games. Now, you might be hearing this, and you might not be in the greater St. Louis listening area, St. Charles area, where you can go physically to Bugs Comics and Games. That's okay, because like most businesses, they have a website, bugscomicsandgames.com. You can go there. You can check out their array of back issues. They've got a lot of variant covers that they'll get from the publishers, and those are always great to get. And Larry's always very good about people on eBay get these and they try to scalp them. They try to jump the price up. Larry's very good about keeping the price on his variants at a very fair and reasonable price, so you're not worried about getting gouged by some guy out there who bought a couple and is now trying to turn them around for a quick buck. That's another great thing I love about Larry. He's got a lot of integrity, and when he runs a business that way, he runs it with integrity. I've known Larry for quite a while. He used to own a comic book store, Bugs Comics and Games, ironically enough, way back when I was, before I even had my driver's license. I'd hop on my bike and I'd ride all the way from where I lived by Hazelwood Central up to the West Florissant Road. That may not make a lot of sense for those of you who aren't in the greater St. Louis area, but some of you might know how far of a bike ride that was. But I've been buying my comic books from Larry forever. He's now reopened a comic book store, and it's great to the nostalgic blast of that, coupled with seeing him behind the counter, and of course going to someone who I trust. I trust their opinion on comic books. I trust his insight. He's got a lot of great experience, and if you're looking to sell your collection, by the way, you might want to give Larry and Tim a call, and they will probably give you the best value you can possibly get for your comic books if you're looking to sell. And that's one of the things. He is always buying collections, so if you've been in the store, go in a couple weeks, you might see a brand new set of comic books out. But if you're going to buy your comic books, do it from a small business. Don't buy it from a large conglomerate or anything like that. BugsComicsandGames.com is the website, and of course, give their Facebook page a like. Facebook.com/Bugs Comics and Games. Very proud to be partnered with Larry and have him and Bugs Comics as the official sponsor for comic books here on Geek to Me Radio. And with that, we're going to take our quick commercial break. We'll be right back talking Green Lantern with Director Martin Campbell. Please stand by.
Hi, this is George Newbern, the voice of Superman. You are listening to Geek to Me Radio.
Welcome back to our 300th episode here on Geek to Me Radio. We are talking with Director Martin Campbell. Before we get into his thoughts on Green Lantern now, a decade out from when it first aired, I shouldn't say aired, but debuted in theaters, I want to make sure we tell you about the people who keep this show going. The reason the show is going for 300 episodes, literally going for 300 episodes, and that is the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. I've worked with St. Charles now for 25 years in some capacity or another. They do great festivals. I've been involved with the festivals. I've worked with the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau on a lot of different projects. So when I launched the radio show back in 2016, they were the first people I went to and said, hey, would you guys be willing to sponsor a show? And they immediately said, yes, let's do this without hesitation. It's a great city. There's always something good going on there. A lot of fun to be had from the concerts and things that go on at the Family Arena out there in St. Charles to the parades and the festivals that happen right there along Main Street that are planned by the people at the CVB, between Elizabeth Phelps and Ryan Cooper and all the great staff they have there who put these festivals together. Plus, if you're a foodie, my goodness, you can walk up and down Main Street and probably eat at a different restaurant every day for 3 weeks and probably still not hit all the restaurants, and you'll want to find something new every time you go. It's a great place to visit. If you're from out of town, you're listening to this right now and you're not in the greater St. Louis, St. Charles area, come visit. Please come visit. We've got hotels. We've got bed and breakfasts. There's always something going on. If you're an outdoors man, if you want to camp, they've got RV parks and things like that. They've got bed and breakfast. If you want a little more of a rustic kind of charming experience, maybe you're celebrating an anniversary or something like that. And of course, hotels with first class accommodations to fit any kind of range of taste or whatever you're looking for in a place to stay. But it's a great place to visit. People are great. A lot of things to see and do. It's a great vibe. You'll feel it as soon as you come. So if you have not been there in St. Charles yet, come visit. We highly encourage you to do so. And if you haven't visited it lately and you're in the greater St. Louis, St. Charles area, come back and see it again. You'll find something new. I guarantee it. So yes, thank you for 300 episodes to our premier sponsor, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. Literally would not have been able to go for 300 episodes without their support. Once again, that website, discoverstcharles.com. Plan your trip there, discoverstcharles.com for an historically good time. As we wrap up our chat with Director Martin Campbell here, right before we took that last break, I'd asked him about looking back a decade later, his thoughts on the movie he directed for Warner Brothers, Green Lantern.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'm not sure I should have done it. I did it simply for the reason you said, which I'd never done a superhero movie before. I went through all the comics and so forth. I don't think it was a great script at all. Finally, I think that was a problem. Perhaps me doing it for the wrong reason, which was, oh, well, I haven't done a superhero movie before. Why don't I do it? I think you kind of have to be an enthusiast for that type of movie. And of course, on top of that, I think our villain was Parallax, who was, the comics. So
yeah.
It was all kind of, it was all very, related to the comics and so forth. But I think the mistake was, we had a bad villain. I always refer to it as a cloud with a face on. You know what I mean? Well,
yeah.
And really, you need to have a damn good villain. That's the point. And I think that was a mistake. You needed a kind of human villain, as it were, that Green Lantern could go up against. And even though we had Kilowog and we had what's his name, Sinestro and Abansir and all of these characters, and they were all straight out of the comics and so forth. And in fact, the story was was taken out of the comics and so forth.
Right.
But I think the script could have been, it could have been a better script, perhaps with another director. He would have done a better job than I did. I worked bloody hard on it, but, I think, like, for example, Bond, I love doing Bond because I love watching Bond movies, as simple as that. I think you have to have a love for the genre, really. Perhaps I was the wrong person to direct it. So I have to blame myself to a certain extent on that.
In the decade since that has come out, we've obviously seen a slew of superhero movies from Marvel and from DC. Have you kept up with any of them, or does it kind of make you interested in possibly directing another superhero film, or even a series like we've got with WandaVision and Loki on Disney Plus? These superhero series are dropping. Has it given you any interest in revisiting the genre?
No.
Okay.
The answer to that. I honestly think there are better people than me to be directing superhero movies. As I say, I think you have to be invested kind of emotionally in that. And there are. I mean, I love, for example, the last Avengers movie. I thought was wonderfully directed, and I actually enjoyed that. But generally, not my genre. Even the Star Wars, gradually, I think, got more and more disappointing, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
I like the original, the George Lucas one, but I just thought they went downhill. They did too many of them. I don't think the scripts were very good, and I don't think they were made very well. And gradually, if you look at it on a descending scale, I think the returns got more and more, less and less, if you see what I mean. And that was because I think the films just were not very good by the end of them.
I know Martin Scorsese has come out and said something about like superhero movies aren't real cinema, and a lot of people have had some pushback on that. It's not that you're saying they're not real cinema. It's just that it's A, it's not your wheelhouse, but B, I think what you said earlier, it takes a good villain. You've got to have a good villain. And that I think is a crux for any movie.
I agree. I think it is. And we didn't. That's the point. We did Parallax as a character, of course, in the comics. But, as far as a villain goes, the answer is no. He is kind of ineffectual as a villain, and you feel no real threat from him. He's just a sort of, as I say, a cloud with a face on it. And, in any of these movies, whether it be James Bond or whether it be a superhero movie, you need a damn good villain. No question about it, because and inevitably they're more interesting often than the lead, if you see what I mean, the hero.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Roger Moore has even stated before he passed, he said he really wished he could play the villain because the villains always have the best roles.
Absolutely. No question about it.
I know we just got a few minutes with you left before we have to move on and let you go. When we have celebrities on the show, I sometimes play a game with them called Celebrity This or That, where I basically ask you your choice of two things, and you tell me which one is your preference. So if I were to say, for example, the Beatles or the Stones, which of those two?
That's the question. Oh, it would be the Stones for me.
Stones. And if what your favorite season, spring or fall?
Sorry, the season's fall or what?
Spring or fall?
Oh, I think spring.
And peanut butter, I'm not sure if you're a peanut butter guy, crunchy or smooth?
Smooth.
And if you had to direct one franchise or another, would you take Star Wars or Star Trek?
Yikes. Well, it certainly wouldn't be Star Trek. It would be Star Wars. Definitely not Star Trek.
And finally, last question, your preference, Octopussy or Never Say Never Again?
You know what? Never Say Never Again. Not Octopussy. Never Say Never Again, I think, is neither of them amongst the best of the Bond films. But if I had a choice of two, it would be Never Say Never. There
you go. Celebrity This or That with the great Martin Campbell. Make sure you check out Memory in theaters April 29th. Go to your local Marcus Theaters or Movie Tavern. Martin Campbell, I cannot say enough how much I've appreciated chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time today and continued success to you.
Thanks very much indeed, James. Thank you.
That's going to do it. Another show in the books. Thanks again to Director Martin Campbell. Make sure you get out and see Memory in theaters. Do it at a Marcus Theater, of course, but get out and see Memory starring Liam Neeson, Martin Campbell's brand new movie that he directed. Huge thanks to Joey V, my executive producer, who has also been with me for 300 episodes. I don't know how he puts up with me, but I'm eternally grateful that he does because, again, without him, without his encouragement and his kind of always prodding me to try something new, do something better, to kind of stretch my creative limbs, without Joey V's help, I would not be doing this for 300 episodes either. So huge shout out to him. If you ever hear me talking about Joey V, you know, he's the guy behind the scenes, makes the show sound and look as good as it does. Wouldn't be here without him either. Thank you to Martin Campbell. Thank you to Marcus Theaters. Thank you to Larry and Tim at Bugs Comics. Thank you all for listening as long as you have. If you're new listeners, hopefully you'll be with me for the next 300. And until then, my friends.
It's not in the way you watch I zombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young Art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's a show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's a show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, Casino Royale. Good night.
Hey kids, are your parents about to buy you a shiny new toy from Amazon?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Well, don't be selfish. Share some of that money with us. Before going on Amazon, make sure to type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser. It will look just like Amazon.com, except it'll say referral Geek to Me Radio up top. And then when you check out, a tiny percentage will go to support the show without costing you 1 cent more. So before your parents get you that gizmo, gadget, or widget, make sure they type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser.
Bit.ly/geek2me. Bit.ly/geek2me.